Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and this time I'm continuing on with my firmware 3.1 series, the new firmware we've recently received from the fine folks at Line 6, and what an update it has been. I think the reviews online have been pretty much all positive from what I've been reading, and even my own feelings about it are the same. So I've had a lot of requests to do this video, and it's something I was planning on doing regardless, is updating my template, my preset template for 3.1 and seeing what changes I might make to it using some of the new features. So that's what we're going to do today. So anybody who follows my channel knows that for a long time now, I can't remember exactly which firmware I actually made this for originally, but I've updated it every time there's been a firmware update that's kind of added new features that I would like to add into this template. And the 3.1 firmware definitely applies. So let's go over to HXEdit and take a look at what I would do. Now, the thing about this is I have an amp in this template right now. I'm going to leave that blank. So this template, as always with the previous ones, you're going to have to add your own amp because I tend to use these starting points for all of my presets. Now, obviously, these are not going to be in my previous presets because there's some new features here that I'm going to add in my upcoming presets. And, I don't think that anything I'm doing here is going to, be worlds apart from previous ones. Any presets I've made previously are going to still be perfectly fine. And some of these things can just be added to them if somebody likes it. And not everybody's necessarily going to like the changes I make here. So just to keep in mind, I use this as a starting point and everybody can tweak from there. So a couple of the new additions here is adding the amazing new retro reel block to the end of the chain. Just like adding kind of recording to tape, right? After you've done all your other processing, record it down to the tape, and this is what we're going after here. Still my same LA Studio comp, parametric equalizer, those things haven't changed. The Verb, though, I'm now going to put in this new dynamic hall reverb. I really like the tweakability of this, and it's going to give us a lot of options. Now, again, some folks may not want this. They may want just the old room reverb that I used to use, and they can easily be swapped back out. Going to stick with my trusty old transistor tape delay. Love that. And I'm still going to have my low and high shelf EQ in there. So what I've done here is I've just loaded in a placator dirty. I think I turned off the C45, maybe bumped the presence up a notch, changed out the cabinet to a 412 greenback 25 with a 160 ribbon. This is kind of what I would typically do, is swap that cab out on the placator during when it comes up and shut the C45 off. But if I turn everything off here, get rid of all of the processing, this is what just the raw amp sound is going to be as it comes up and with the little changes I made. All right, so nothing terribly wrong with that. But let's go through a block at a time now and see what these additions are going to add. So on this shelf, the low and high shelf, the starting point settings I always use is I put the low frequency and the high frequency set at 650 hertz. I usually cut all the frequencies below by 2 dB, and I boost all the frequencies above by 2 dB. So the difference is, here is the sound again with that off. Turn on. You'll kind of hear it just cleans up some mud and adds a little bit of sparkle and kind of polishes the sound a little bit. Okay, the delay, very simple. I mean, you're going to want to change these settings to whatever you want. I have the mix around 26%, feedback at 22%, set to the note sync of a quarter note. And I'll turn that off for now. Now the reverb. Let's put this on here. The settings I've used are decay of 1.5 seconds, pre-delay of 50 milliseconds, room size at 30 meters, diffusion of 60%, moved the damping up to about 6 kilohertz, mix at 35%, and motion around 3.3. Yeah, so basically that's going to sound like this. And again, you can tweak that. These are just starting points, right? If you want less decay, more pre-delay, whatever you want, you can change that around, maybe bring the damping down. I left it up. Get a little more high end out of that. Let me bring that down. If you want to darken it up. Depends on what you're looking for, right? And I would even tweak these depending on the situation I may even be using them in. So, as we move on to the Parametric EQ, I get a lot of questions on the template, and they say, well, why do you use it when you don't really have, low gains at 0, mid gains at 0, high gains at 0? I'm using it kind of on a flat setting. Well, I am using it for low cut and high cut, and I start off with 100 hertz on the low cut, 12 kilohertz on the high cut. A lot of folks then say, well, why don't you just use that on your cab block, right? And if you notice, I've turned the low cuts and high cuts off here. Well, the reason is there's a different slope to the actual EQ block cuts versus the cab block cuts. The EQ block cuts are a little more dramatic and drastic. So I just prefer these settings. You can use your cab block, and I do a lot of times on the stomp if I don't have enough blocks to add a sort of a dedicated EQ block. But now with this off, that's what it sounds like with it on. Okay, so here we go. Moving on to the classic LA Studio comp at the end. Now, the settings I start with are peak reduction at 5.5, gain at 5. I leave it on compress, emphasis at 0.9, and mix at 100%. Now, again, these might change depending on what I'm doing. There's a lot of times I'll use the mix control and mix in some parallel compression. The other thing you gotta be careful of here, and I've mentioned this before, is depending on how much signal you're hitting into this. If I go over to here and crank up the channel volume, I'm going to get more gain reduction, simply because I'm hitting more signal into the front of the compressor and it's going to hit its threshold sooner. So I like to go to this block and just look down and see what I'm getting on my gain reduction meters on my Helix, which is on the floor. And I'm getting about a dB to 2 dB of gain reduction, which is all I want. Again, I've said it a million times, but I keep getting questions about it. Why do you put a compressor after reverb? Why do you put a compressor after delay? It's just acting as a little bit of glue at the end of the chain, much in the way a mastering engineer would use it. So I don't want to use it in a heavy-handed way. I just want to use it to sort of kiss the sound and glue everything together. So that's going to sound like this with it off. Now right now I have it so that the sound kind of jumps up a little bit. I'm not concerned that it's not at unity gain, because for me that's an always on type of thing. But if you are concerned about that, we can go to the level control, maybe drop that down a couple dB. Now you'll hear it's kind of more at the same level. You'll just hear it adds a nice gooiness to the overall tone. And I really like the sound of that. Finally, the retro reel. I'm going to actually use this in a really subtle way, because if we go overboard on this, it could do more harm than good. But what a beautiful effect this is. I'm going to set with the wow and flutter settings at 0, saturation at 0.5, low and high cuts off, tape speed at 30 inches per second. And again, the level here, I just want to try to get it at unity gain. adds a little bit of weight, a little bit of goo to the sound, I guess. Goo, if that's even a proper descriptive term. I'm going to use that from now on, though. It's gooey. So if we now go to here, I'm going to just change this to multi-output. So all we're doing is getting this path with none of the effects on the second path. That's the way that that amp sounds without my little template on it. We can even bring that delay back in. Again, with it all off. We get that with all of that processing. So again, this is not carved in stone at all. You're going to have to tweak this to your ideals and your particular situation. Maybe it's going to be a little different with a clean tone or a edge of breakup tone or a heavier tone. But I like to have those blocks, they're just ready to go. And for me, a lot of times they're in the always on kind of department. I love those kind of gooey, vintagey tones, and I love that retro reel at the end now. But I still like to use it with the LA Studio Comp. I think they're kind of serving two different purposes and work really well together. But because a lot of folks maybe don't want that on all the time, I'm also going to come in here. I'm going to assign these to different foot switches, all right? So we could come down here and maybe assign the retro reel to foot switch 11, compressor to foot switch 10. I probably just leave the EQ out. We can assign the reverb to foot switch 9, delay to foot switch 8. And you know, we could even assign this high and low shelf to a foot switch itself also, simply because we may not want it on for certain things if we don't like what it's doing. For me, a lot of these are always on type of effects. The retro reel, the LA Studio Comp, and the shelf EQ. Reverb and delay I will have on a foot switch because maybe I want those on and off depending on what I'm doing. But I'll put those in there like this, so if you want to flip them in and out, you can quite easily, or you can assign them to whatever foot switch you want. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That's going to be on custom tone without the amp model though. So just be sure to include your own amp model. This is just designed as a template to get you up and running. Load that in, add your amp model in, and hopefully you'll have a really nice, polished, kind of studio and live ready tone kind of right out of the box without having to tweak too much. But you always do have to tweak a little bit. So I hope you guys like that. Please like the video, share it with anybody who you think would get use out of it or enjoy it. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification, get notified when I put new content out, and I'll be back really soon with some more. Go grab this on custom tone. I'll have the link down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks again for tuning in. Ciao for now.